So today we have a couple speakers lined up. We have Caleb Kitson, and he's going to be sharing with us about his family and about the homestead endeavor that they have been at for a while. And he sent some great pictures along. We're going to share those as well. Also, we have Brother Jared is going to be presenting another teaching. I'm looking forward to seeing this one too. Also, remember that we have the Torah portion. It is scheduled for this week, and the portion is called Shemini, which means the eighth. And it's found in Leviticus chapter 9, verse 1 to 11, verse 47. Now, if you'd like to know who we're a part of, just look at this down here. HTTPS, which is basically www.assemblyoftherighteous.com. Go to that website, assemblyoftherighteous.com. That's basically the fellowships that we are all in together. A piece of scripture to start our service with. And we're going to look at Psalms 24. This is a great scripture, frankly. It says here, the earth belongs to Yahweh and all that fills it, the world and those who dwell in it. For he has founded it upon the seas, and upon the waters he does establish it. Who does go up into the mountain of Yahweh, and who does stand in his set-apart place? He who has innocent hands and a clean heart, who did not bring his life to naught, and did not swear deceivingly. He receives a blessing from Yahweh, and righteousness from the Elohim of his deliverance. This is the generation of those who seek him, Jacob, who seek his face, Selah. Lift up your heads, O you gates, and be lifted up, you everlasting doors, and let the sovereign of esteem come in. Who is this sovereign of esteem? Yahweh, strong and mighty, Yahweh, mighty in battle. Lift up your heads, O you gates, even lift up, you everlasting doors, and let the sovereign of esteem come in. Who is this sovereign of esteem? Yahweh of hosts, he is the sovereign of esteem. Selah. And isn't that a great worship? Psalms. And we think about the majesty and the greatness of Yahweh and what he has done for each of us, for our families. He has guided us. I don't think there's a single person here who could say that they have not seen the hand of Yahweh on their life. If you are trying to serve him, if you are a believer in his blessed Son, Yeshua, and you're covered by the blood of the Lamb, my friends, you have a great Father who looks after your affairs in a very personal way. Now, let me just do a quick introduction here because I came across Caleb on, I think it was X, and also in the Telegram group. Caleb is in Pete Rambo's Telegram group, and he is the husband and father of 7, and he engages in subsistence farming and harvesting on a remote island in Alaska. Caleb and his family are Torah-observant followers of Yahweh and his son Yeshua. They have goals which include to build a farm completely free of the use of modern inputs and produce all the food that their family eats. Now, here's some background about Caleb. He grew up in Michigan and as an adult served in the Army National Guard, police officer, corrections officer, and builder. But the vision he always had was to subsistence farm in Alaska. Additionally, Caleb's wife, Shayla, was born and raised on an Indian reservation in Alaska, and he met her when he moved up to Alaska. And so with that, I want to give you Caleb, and he is going to be sharing with us for a little bit of time today, and we certainly welcome him. Go ahead, brother. See if we can get you on the mic. Make sure we can get you on the mic here.
Can you hear me?
There we go. We can hear you. Good now.
All right. Well, good morning, everyone. So I'm not don't normally present things like this, so it might be a little bit scattered, but hopefully it's coherent enough. Yeah, I just kind of wanted I had a overview of a few things I wanted to talk about with you guys. Um, it's basically just the difference between kind of the economy that we have now, particularly in the Western world, and the economy that I think that God originally designed for us to be participating in. Um, and right off the bat, it kind of gets. I don't think that we can reduce it to, this is the only way that we should be living because obviously, there's things like gold and silver and iron and tools all used for the temple service and um, mentioned as being part of our future. But I think at the base layer, the way that we're supposed to be living is kind of not to sound like a hippie, but in in harmony with creation. Um, so I was going to start out and read a couple scriptures. I don't need to read the beginning one that we're all familiar with. Be fruitful, multiply, fill all the earth and subdue it. We know that one. Um, we know all these, I'm sure, as well, but I'd like to read them anyway. Bear with me a second. I'm going to Isaiah chapter 2, 4, verse 4. He will judge between the nations and will settle disputes for many peoples. They will beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation will not take up sword against nation, nor will they train for war anymore. And going to Micah 4:2. Many nations will come and say, come, let us go up to the mountain of Yahuwah, to the house of the Elohim of Yaakov. He will teach us his ways, so that we may walk in his paths. The law will go out from Zion, the word of Yahuwah from Yerushalayim. He will judge between many peoples, and will settle disputes for strong nations far and wide. They will beat their swords into plowshares, and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation will not take up sword against nation, nor will they train for war any more. Every man will sit under his own vine, and under his own fig tree, and no one will make them afraid, for Yahuwah Tsabaoth has spoken. All the nations may walk in the names of their gods. We will walk in the name of Yahuwah our Elohim forever and ever. So, right in those verses, I see a kind of a strong juxtaposition of, uh, well, what Adam was put in the garden to do, which is, take care of the garden, and we see Abel taking care of the flocks, and we see this stuff over and over. I didn't read it, but Zephaniah 2:6 also talks about um, kind of in the messianic age of Israel grazing their flocks by the sea. And so we have this idea that in the kingdom to come is kind of a sort of a return to an Edenic ideal, I guess. Not totally, but in many ways, So it's like the opposites. You either have growth, which what are we doing? We're beating our swords into plowshares to prepare ground, spears into pruning hooks to prune trees to make growth explode, rather than using them for instruments that take away life. And so at a base level, the economy that God designs is kind of fractal. Um, and I had a friend who used to use the word fractal a lot, and I didn't know what it meant. And so I just pretended like I did so that I felt smart, but I felt dumb. So I'm going to go ahead and just define the word fractal here. It's a complex, never-ending geometric pattern that appears similar at any scale of magnification, exhibiting self-similarity. And so I wouldn't say that it's totally fractal because this is, almost exact copies. No matter if you zoom in or zoom out, it's like, ferns with their fronds, and when you look at it, it's the same, but it's growing off of itself. And it's not exactly how Yah made things work because, while Adam was made in the image of Elohim, it wasn't until Seth that Adam fathered a son in his own image, right? So, not exactly the same. Cain, Abel, not the same, but Seth, in some way, was the image of his own father. So genes play a role in growth and change, and we know that we can change. A good example is a dog. Um, you have a Chihuahua and a Great Dane. They're the same species. They came from the same ancestor. Um, but I mean, you can see there's a lot of difference there. Uh, yeah, I say, but what makes it fractal is the boundaries that Elohim set when he made each according to their kind. So just like with the dogs, you might see up and down, or among men, we have red, brown, yellow, black, and white, but we're all according to our kind. And so, we can be anywhere on that chromatic spectrum, but you cannot make a man become not a man anymore, no matter how, whatever direction you want to go with selective, so-called breeding. So that is the economy that Yah made. That it's bound in its kinds, but those kinds build out from each other. So from one man can come, you know, 10, 20, 30 children. And from those children can come several hundred. And from those several hundred can come thousands. So you're being fruitful, you're multiplying. And so the kind of the two analogies I always use to help people think about the differences between man's economy, or you could say the economy of the God of this world, and the economy of Yah. A good example is if you take a cow and a car. So they can basically give the same use cases, I guess. They can both be used for transportation. They can both be used to get groceries. Um, they can both be used, I guess, to plow a field. You'd have a hard time doing it with a car unless you had some big mud tires, but and a good engine. But the difference between a cow and a car is that, well, what do you constantly have inputs with both of them, right? The inputs in a car is going to be fuel that's going to be consistent. You're never going to stop putting fuel and oil in that thing. And how do you get the fuel and the oil? Well, yeah, you just go buy it, right? But no, it has to come out of the ground. It has to be refined. And so you have all these massive systems with multiple points of failure that this car is relying on just for you to go down the road. And then, of course, you have replacement parts, and those have to come from, India and China and Japan and Canada and all these places, and that it has to come from metals that are mined and refined. And yeah, so you just have this insane supply chain just to keep that car running. And eventually, after you've put 10 or 20,000 or $30,000 into it, you're going to come to the point where it's not worth repairing anymore. And at that point, what are you going to do with it? You might scrap it out, get a couple hundred, probably a couple $1,000s now for it if you do it right. But yeah, I mean, eventually all that stuff is going to go back into the earth. It's going to rust away. The plastic is going to sit there forever unless somebody burns it and, puts carbon up into the atmosphere. But for the most part, that car has it's come to its end, and that's the end of it. And it did nothing but eat and eat and eat, and it gave you, I would say, the only thing that it gave you maybe was time. But even that was an illusion because the amount of time that went into that was, I mean, it was just an insane amount of time, right? All of the men and women and resources that are involved just to produce that one thing. So you put that up next to a cow. It does the same thing. Instead of taking you to the grocery store, it's making groceries, right? It's making milk. It's making a calf every 2 to 3 years. It replaces itself over and over and over and over. And the inputs there, assuming that you don't have any, major injuries to the animal or sickness, the input is grass. It's what God grows. Right? You put it out there. The animal, it's something that we can't eat, but we don't have to go out there. We don't have to refine it. We don't even have to put a sickle to it. We just put the cow out there. It goes and does what it does. And you take the milk from it. You take the meat from it. You can hook it up to a plow. You can hook it up to a cart to go where you need to go. And it's replicating, right? And then at the end of its life, if you want to slaughter it, you can eat that. But it's produced, potentially 5 or 6 other cattle for you. And even if it dies, of an injury or of natural causes, you can feed it to your dogs. It's still not going to go to waste. So that's those are the things that, I like people to think about it in kind of sustainability. And so that leads us into, um, what time are we at? Yeah, I'll just get into Jonadab, or Yonadab, son of Rechab, real quick here. This is in Jeremiah 35. I'm just going to read the whole chapter. This is the word that came to Yirmiyahu from Yahuwah during the reign of Jehoiakim, son of Yoshiahu, king of Yehudah. Go to the Rechabite family and invite them to come to one of the side rooms of the house of Yahuwah and give them wine to drink. So I went to Yaazaniah, son of Yirmiyahu, the son of Habatsinyah, and his brothers and all his sons, the whole family of the Rechabites. I brought them into the house of Yahuwah, into the room of the sons of Hanan, son of Igdaliah, and the man of God. It was next to the room of the officials, which was over that of Maaseiah, son of Shallum, the doorkeeper. Then I set bowls full of wine and some cups before the men of the Rechab family, and said to them, "Drink some wine." But they replied, "We do not drink wine, because our forefather Yonadab ben Rechab gave us this command: neither you nor your descendants must ever drink wine. Also, you must never build houses, sow seed, or plant vineyards. You must never have any of these things, but must always live in tents. Then you will live a long time in the land where you are nomads. We have obeyed everything our forefather Yonadab ben Rechab commanded us. Neither we, nor our wives, nor our sons and daughters have ever drunk wine, or built houses to live in, or had vineyards, fields, or crops. We have lived in tents, and have fully obeyed everything our forefather Yonadab commanded us. But when Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, invaded this land, we said, 'Come, we must go to Jerusalem to escape the Babylonian and Aramean armies.' So we have remained in Jerusalem." Then the word of Yahuwah came to Yirmiyahu, saying, "This is what Yahuwah Tsabaoth, the Elohim of Israel, says. Go and tell the men of Yehudah and the people of Jerusalem, will you not learn a lesson and obey my words, declares Yahuwah? Yonadab ben Rechab ordered his sons not to drink wine, and this command has been kept. To this day they do not drink wine because they obey their forefathers' command. But I have spoken to you again and again, yet you have not obeyed me. Again and again I sent all my servants the prophets to you. They said, each of you must turn from your wicked ways and reform your actions. Do not follow other gods to serve them, and you will live in the land I have given to you and your forefathers. But you have not paid attention or listened to me. The descendants of Jonadab ben Rechab have carried out the command of their forefather gave them, but these people have not obeyed me. Therefore, this is what the Lord God Almighty, the God of Israel, says. Listen, I am going to bring on Yehudah and everyone living in Jerusalem every disaster I pronounced against them. I spoke to them, but they did not listen. I called to them, but they did not answer. Then Yirmiyahu said to the family of the Rechabites, This is what Yahuwah Tsabaoth, the Elohim of Israel, says. You have obeyed the command of your forefather Jonadab, and have followed all his instructions, and have done everything he ordered. Therefore, this is what Yahuwah Tsabaoth, the Elohim of Israel, says. Jonadab ben Rechab will never fail to have a man to serve me. Okay, so in this passage we have the kind of the consequences of Israel never ceasing to serve these foreign gods, and Yahuwah is going to send them to Babylon, right, to the land of foreign gods. And we see throughout Scripture this call over and over to come out of Babylon, right, come out of her, my people. And I do think that that's a spiritual command, right? That at all times, that just like being friends with the world is enmity toward God. We're not to be participating in any of those systems, not in their feasts, not in the food that they eat, if it's opposed to what God says is food, and abstaining from sexual immorality, all of that stuff. But I think too that there is an element of a physical movement when to come out of Babylon. And the reason there is because when we look at in the prophecies about the tribulation, we see men going and hiding in caves, and we also know that our return to the land is not merely spiritual, but it is physical. And so I think that there is some wisdom in trying to get out of Babylon. Whatever Babylon might be, you might think it's America, you might think it's Rome, but I think wisdom says to try to get at least away from cities. But so anyway, back to what we just read. So Jonadab ben Rechab had told his sons, and they told their wives and their sons and daughters that they were not going to drink wine. Drinking wine, I think in the context here, has to do with participating in the revelries and the feasting and all the wickedness that was going on, because the reason given there is so that they'll live long in the land, right? And but the other thing that they're told not to do is to build houses to live in, or have vineyards, fields, or crops. They're told to just live in tents. So that doesn't necessarily mean that they weren't trading with people in the land for grain and things like that. But we have people today who still primarily subsist on their flocks. Most of what they're eating and drinking is milk, cheese, meat. And that has to do with living in the desert. We see I'm trying to remember where it is. I think it's in Isaiah chapter 7, maybe, where it talks about, I think when Israel is taken over by or kind of decimated by the Assyrians, and the remnant that are in the land, it says each man, and the translation, you could go a few different ways with this, but the essence of it is each man will keep alive one cow and two sheep, and the remnant in the land will eat curds and honey. And so eating off of the livestock, this is it's stripping away all of the inputs of man and bringing it right back down to the earth, to God's provision in the desert. Livestock, manna, right? Ravens bringing bread and meat, drinking beside the brook. This is waiting basically on the hand of Yah for our provision and letting him bring forth from the land good things for us to eat. So I think part of the reason that um, Jonadab, son of Rechab, told his children, his sons, not to build houses, but to live in tents, not to plant vineyards, not to plant crops, was so that they wouldn't become attached to the land and attached to place, so that they wouldn't settle, so that they could be ready to move. And so I think that we have examples of that in the patriarchs, right? You know, Abraham kept flocks. He lived in tents. He was always ready to go. Every time Yahovah said, get up and go, he never said, well, I have all these houses and riches and everything that, you know, I have vineyards. Nope, it's just the flocks there, food, you know, our food sources here, ready to rock. We go. Yitzhak is the same, although he did plant crops and they yielded 100-fold. And I think Yitzhak kind of fits into a similar pattern as David did. So it's a slightly different pattern. But then back to Yaakov, he lives the same as Abraham, right? With his flocks and herds, living in tents, ready to go. Interestingly, I mean, he doesn't even build houses for himself when he gets to Sukkot, right? He builds shelters for his animals, but they continue to live in tents. And and then of course the 12 tribes, particularly the Reubenites, Gadites, and the half tribe of Manasseh, had kept many flocks and herds. And I have David came from the pasture. Even after David was anointed king, he waited in the wilderness until um, until Yahovah had accomplished everything that he intended to accomplish. So I think that this is kind of this is our call, as I think to have that wilderness mindset. Again, not everyone's going to be called to go move to a remote island in Alaska. Uh, not everyone's even called to move out of the city. Yah may have a call in your life to be in the city and to be there till the bitter end. But I think to have that wilderness mindset is something that we're called to, that we don't love the world, that we don't cling to it, and that we are prepared to go wherever he says without feeling, you know, this attachment to the things that we have or the place that we live or even the people that we love, right? Yeshua talks about that. So, um, okay, so now I'm kind of changing gears here and talking a little bit about preparation. Um, I don't know how I'm doing for time, but Brother Gregory, just if I'm
Go
going kind of
ahead.
long.
We got plenty of time, a good 20 minutes or so. Go ahead. You're
Okay,
doing
cool.
great.
Sounds good. Okay. So now I want to shift gears and talk a little bit about what it looks like, I think, to live in the times that we're living in. I think most people here can kind of see some gnarly stuff coming down the pipe. And, you know, whether you think that that is just kind of the cyclical things that we have every couple generations with wars, rumors of wars, famines in various places, that sort of thing, or whether you're seeing some signs that Yeshua may be preparing to return, that the Antichrist may be soon revealed. Regardless, I think it's apparent that some tough times are coming. So, kind of my thought process is it's something like the prepare for the worst and hope for the best, but except we know that the best is coming. But so I say I separate it into two kind of preparation mindsets, and the one is preparing for current times, current hard times, I should say, and the other mindset is preparing for tribulation times. And there's significant overlap between the two because you know the things that we're probably going to see during the tribulation period, similar hardships have occurred throughout human history. I mean, we even see that in scriptures. I mean, awful things happening. Women being pregnant, women ripped open, babies, you know, thrown to the ground. awful things. And I know it's hard for people to imagine these sorts of things happening again. But the fact of the matter is those things happen over and over in history. So, um, so I say here, preparing for short-term supply chain disruptions. So I think it's important. A lot of people, their go-to, even out here, I'm the only person on my island. We have about 40 full-time residents and another 10 to 15 that just come out for the summer months. But even among the people out here, I'm the only one that is trying to get completely free from the need of electricity and internal combustion. Um, Most people here kind of see what's coming, and their solution has been we need solar power because they still have freezers to run, refrigerators, all, televisions. Some of them have fish tanks, um, which is all great. But and I think though that it's to me to put that kind of capital into infrastructure that ultimately is going to need to still be regularly serviced, right? We talked about these constant inputs. If your solar panels get wiped out in a hailstorm or a tree falls on them, well, you have $10,000 of solar panels to replace. If you're in an economy where you don't have access to that supply chain or you don't have money, you're kind of SOL. That's right. The best way to preserve meat is on the hoof. And again, that's why I think raising goats and sheep is kind of the key to this whole thing because you can eat through that in a couple days with a large family. But anyway, so so looking at what how do we? You can still live comfortably, right? There's ways to do it. There are wood burning hot water heaters. There is wood burning cook stove. That's what right here what we cook on. And um, so basically, the way that I see it is you use the money that you'd be spending on preparing to prepare in the smartest way possible, right? If you have a well at home, rather than saying, well, I need to make sure that my well pump can get electricity, so I'm gonna put solar panels to it. Great, do that. But have a redundancy, do the research, find a deep well, hand pump, and install it. This is all stuff that in the short term, there's a million reasons why even your own personal electrical infrastructure can fail or not be replaceable. And if you have, um, you're doing things the old ways, there's just a lot. It's a lot less likely to be a failure point. So one, I think that this is just wisdom, but the other thing too is right, like all this stuff, kind of these simple machines and using animals for the extra power that you need and stuff like that. I mean, this is the way that mankind has lived for close to 6,000 years to varying degrees, but we have never ever lived the way we live now, and it has become for most people so normal that they cannot fathom life outside of it. And the way our great grandparents lived seems archaic and barbaric to most people when that is the way that we are designed to live. And there's a reason for it. So, most people are not prepared for, even the event that they might have to leave home. And so that's kind of my second point of preparing for tribulation times. And like I said, there's some crossover here with just regular hard times. There may come a time when it's not safe to stay home anymore. A lot of people want to stockpile years worth of food. But if you are in a situation where you need years worth of food because the grocery stores are down, somebody bigger and badder than you is coming for that food. Probably many somebodies. And so it's the I think you're gonna have to head for the hills at that point and be ready to move. So again, like, these are not things that are easy to think about. And I've talked to a lot of people who just say, well, I just die. I guess I'll just die. It's like, man, you say that, but look at your children a minute and tell me now that you're just gonna die. No, you want to do what's smart, what's wise to make sure that you can provide for your family. And so So, thinking about that stuff, having tarps, having axes, having some small fishing equipment, you know that you're going to have to travel light. Um, for me, again, like it's the flocks and herds. I have a yak and a heifer, right? I can't getting cattle out here is just extremely expensive. So this is the best I can do right now because I have to hire landing crafts and everything costs more up here. But those are pack animals. The goats are food on the hoof, right? These things can go anywhere with you. They can go places that you can't go in the mountains. And so, that is that's your food supply right there. You bring a few seed potatoes with you for the next year, and you can live off goat milk and meat, and whatever else you scrounge up. So, and again, I know that this is not possible for everyone. This is not even the path that everyone is being called to, but just things to think about, and so I think I've just about covered. Okay, so I wrote here, um, you do what you can, but don't trust in yourself. Understand that Yah has helped you to understand the time you live in. He will help you prepare, but never abandon love. Never let your love grow cold. That comes from fear. We all face fear regularly, but we cannot succumb to it because greater is He that is in me than he that is in the world. And so at the end of the day, we are trusting in Him, right? Just like Elijah in the wilderness for those 3.5 years, which is clearly a parallel of the 3.5 year period of tribulation. So, it is wisdom to be preparing, to be thoughtful about these things, but not to make it the point where we're doing it because we're terrified of man, right? Who has but breath in his nostrils, and after killing your body can do no more. But I think too, a lot of people are going to do a lot of things that they wouldn't normally do when they're faced with the loss of their children, especially by state actors. Just one last note here. What would you do if you cannot, if you're deciding, let's say the digital ID rolls out and you decide, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to have the bank account. I can have the digital ID. So now you can't get health care anymore. Well, what are you going to do when the state comes up to your house and says, unless you get this digital ID, you don't have a bank account, you don't have health care. That means that you can't take care of these children. So we are going to take your children because you are refusing to take care of them in the way that the state has said you need to. And that's going to be a wake up call for a lot of people. And I think most people aren't thinking in those kinds of terms. Again, I don't know what's going to happen, but you know, just I guess at the end of the day, what I'm trying to do here is just help people to kind of think things through and kind of think about what could come. How do you mitigate that? This is how I ended up where I am. I said what could come. If I decide that I'm going to live without money, that's my goal. That means I can't live anywhere with property tax because if I do and I don't have money to pay it, how long is it going to take for the local sheriff to show up and seize my house from the county? Right. All of these things are things that you need to think through and have, I think, a plan because we are going into some tough times. So that's all I have, brothers. And I don't know if there's time for a couple questions about my personal life or whatever. That's fine. If not, you can always catch me over on Telegram.
Yeah, that is some great points. We do have time for questions, but first, let's look at these other pictures here. Do you want to do any explanation on any of these here? Got some,
Um,
looks like some fish hanging, and looks like, is that a lamb or something? Looks like your daughter is
no,
processing some meat.
that's my middle son, and yep, he's cutting up a deer there.
Okay, all right.
The middle picture is our small smokehouse, and my wife Shayla is making kippered. That's what the strips are on the ceiling, and then I'm guessing she's doing smoking some bellies on that rack. So we put up salmon. Usually, I think this last year we did about 2,000 salmon, but we need to do realistically probably 4 to 6,000 a year. But it's a lot of work. And then on the right is just the addition I just built on the house this past summer. So all that wood is local wood that we milled here at the farm.
That's amazing. I didn't even think about that, but you guys actually have the equipment then to get these boards formed.
Yeah, it's a small mill, and like I said, we don't have, heavy equipment, so I can only do 8 foot boards, and that's about as big of a log as we can handle anyway. So you have to kind of get creative about how you build some things. I've got a 14-foot span there, so I have to overlap 8 foot boards and make sure the blocking's good, and it's still going to be a little bouncy.
Okay. Let's see, we got one last bit here. This is your son here. Looks like there's your mill, looks like.
Yep. Yep, that's one of the bigger logs we've ever put on there, and we did that all by hand and with the block and tackle you see there in the picture.
And am I guessing right? Is this the yak bowl here?
Yeah, he's a lot bigger now, but I didn't have any recent pictures. But yep, that's him. We flew him down from Fairbanks from a farm up there, and it took weeks for them to approve the crate that we could fly him in. It took some work, but yep, that's him.
And then look at this. My goodness, you've got a greenhouse going here. Looks
Yep.
like.
Yep, something that is nice to have, for treats like growing peppers and ginger and things like that. But at the end of the day, it's still one of those things that's not long-term sustainable. Once the covering falls apart, if I don't have money to replace it, that's the end of it. So again, thinking in those terms, what's sustainable where we are, I can reliably grow potatoes, garlic, oats, that sort of thing. So that's what the focus is on, and the greenhouse is kind of cream, I guess.
Okay. And we do have a comment for or a question from Matthew down here. Maybe you could address this. I think that you probably have thought about this. It says, "Isn't gold and silver going to become money again?" What do you think about that?
Um, I think I differ from a lot of people on this stuff. I think gold and silver, yes, is probably going to become money again in the Millennial Kingdom, but I don't think it's going to become money again before then. And the reason I don't think it's going to become money again is because of what's written in Revelation. It says that no one could buy or sell save he that had the mark. So, I mean, that's pretty straightforward, right? If you don't have the mark, you cannot buy and sell. So I don't know what the mark is. I don't know what it means. But if I don't have the mark, it doesn't matter what currency I have in my hands, I can't buy and sell. So, there's a lot of ways that could work. Um, everything could be okay. So example, everything it could be what's the word here? Tokenized, right? So if everything is tokenized, let's say I want to buy groceries. I want to buy some milk from my neighbor, my farmer neighbor. Most people say, yeah, of course he'll take silver or gold, right? Well, maybe he won't because everything has to be tokenized. And if everything is on their ledger, right, and the IRS is keeping track of every little thing and all that stuff, right, and he tries to take that gold and silver, he cannot spend it unless it gets tokenized. And if he puts it into the system to get tokenized to spend it, and I'm talking spend it on the things he needs, like on his bills, right, he's going to have to convert it into a currency that he can pay bills with. Um, they're going to ask, where'd that come from? Well, it came from this guy. Well, it has to get tokenized, and now they're coming to me, right? And I'm trading illegally. So, and same kind of thing. If you want, let's say I want to buy a piece of land, and I've been holding gold and silver for that period of time until the price of land comes down, my gold and silver price goes up. And again, I'm saying this as somebody who holds gold and silver, but this is part of kind of my short term thought process here because there's going to come a point, I think, when it's not going to be usable anymore. But there's going to be kind of this gap in between there where it's still useful. Um, but if you want to buy a piece of land with that, well, you have to tokenize the gold and silver because the land is tokenized. Everything is on their digital ledger. So that's just my take on it. Could be wrong, but
Well, I've had similar thoughts in the effect of if you have a community of people and they all have different skill sets, they all have different animals, they all have different things they're producing, the question then becomes, let's say with the milk situation you were talking about, the question becomes if I'm giving something that preserves life, when you think about food, when you think about shelter, when you think about certain things that have to do with just keeping your family going, uh, then gold or silver just becomes a weight on your desk. But if you can trade, say, some deer meat for some goat milk, that seems more likely in a situation that is so rigidly controlled as what you're describing with the tokenized. Would you agree with that assessment?
For sure. And at the very small local level like that, I do think money still has its uses. I mean, people here trade in silver is pretty common for, trading work or for stuff. I mean, money is still helpful. It's nice to be able to set a price on something for, when you might not have anything else that's kind of comparable as a straight across trade. So, maybe from person to person, it still might work for small transactions, but I just don't think it's going to I think its use as money to support, what we expect to be our current lifestyle is not going to work unless you've got the mark.
Oh, remember, we are in Shimini, which means eighth, and this is Leviticus 9:1. Now, just some basic bullet points here. Shimini basically includes the inauguration, 7 days for Aaron and his sons, and they were then officiated as priests. And also, the very sign of Yahweh was noted that fire came out from Yahweh to consume the offerings on the altar. And it showed that Yahweh's divine presence was among them. So that was an assurance that the people were given. Conversely, if you remember, Aaron had two elder sons, Nadab and Abihu. And what did they do? We're not exactly sure what it is they did. There have been a lot of supposition, but this phrase, offering strange fire before Elohim, which he commanded them not, they transgressed in some way. And immediately, summarily, Yahweh judgment fell upon them. And so they were consumed and burned up. But in the midst of this horrific event, uh, Aaron is silent in the face of this tragedy because, I mean, how can you argue against Yahweh if they really did transgress? Look at how close to the presence of Yahweh they were. The closer you are to the presence of Yahweh, the higher you are held to account. Is that not true? And so there is another interesting thing here where Moses and Aaron they disagree on a point of the Torah regarding the offerings, but it turns out that Aaron was in fact correct. And Moses concedes to that. That shows also, among many other things, the humility of Moses. In fact, the Bible tells us that Moses was among the most humble men upon the face of the earth. You know what part of humility is? Thinking carefully about a subject. When a brother comes to you and says, "Hey, brother, maybe you should think differently about such and such." And humility is to seriously internalize it, consider, pray about it. And you know what? If your brother's right, admit to your brother, "You're right, brother. I think this is a better way," and follow that way. Also, we find the kosher laws and the various animal species which are permissible for food, which, by the way, all of that's still relevant today, by the way. Uh, and certain land animals, of course, it is designated that they have a split hoof and chew the cud. Those two things have to be together for that animal, that land animal, to be considered clean. Also, fish must have fins and scales. And also, among the fowl, there is a list of unclean birds, which are typically carrion eaters, and then the clean birds, which are acceptable to consume. And also, interestingly, this is the one of most oddities I've ever seen in the Torah, but there's actually certain insects that you can eat, apparently, that are clean. Isn't that something? Four types of locusts. And then also, to sum up, in the Shemini, there are laws of ritual purity. And baptism is spoken about. In the Hebrew, it's called mikvah. But baptism the idea, this idea, baptism is not a extraneous New Testament idea. Okay, this all of what was done in the New Testament we can find precedent for in the Tanakh, in the books Genesis to Malachi, which is just as relevant for us today as any other scripture we might find in the New Testament. And so the to sum up this portion, there is some clear designations between what is considered clean and what is considered unclean. So I hope you guys have read this already, but if you haven't, take time with your family to read this because there are some important things in this portion. Leviticus chapter 9, verse 1 to 11, chapter 11, verse 47. Okay, so with that, we're going to have a short intermission. We're going to play a piece of music for you, and then we're going to come back for our second teacher. And this is The Shepherd Found His Sheep.
In the valley of forgotten bones, where the scattered tribes were laid, you breathed upon the dust again and called us by our ancient name. From the wilderness of exile, from the ashes of our shame, you carved your law upon our hearts and lit the everlasting flame. Not abolished, not forsaken, every word you spoke remains. From Sinai's fire to Zion's promise, still your covenant sustained. You are Lord of the Sabbath, Lord of covenant and flame. You restore the broken branches, you call the wanderers by name. You are Lord of the Sabbath, Son of David, righteous King. All the nations stand in wonder as the house begins to sing. Divided sticks are trembling in the hand that pierced the sky. What was scattered now is rising, dry bones living prophesies. From the root and from the olive, sap of mercy flowing deep, crafting in the lost and weary, calling home the wandering sheep. Stone to flesh and fear to freedom, blind eyes opening again. What was written on the tablets now is burning deep within. You are Lord of the Sabbath, Lord of covenant and flame. You restore the broken branches, you call the wanderers by name. You are Lord of the Sabbath, Son of David, righteous King. All the nations stand in wonder as the house begins to sing. Blow breath of God on the slain, raise up an army again. Crown him the root and the branch, the lion who guards the remnant. From the mountain to the sea, from the desert to the deep, every tribe and tongue declaring, the shepherd found his sheep. The shepherd found his sheep. The shepherd found his sheep. You are Lord of the Sabbath, time and history bow low. You are Alpha and Omega, first and last, the stone the builder chose. You are Lord of the Sabbath, throne established, kingdom come. Yeshua, light of Israel, forever we are. But a burden, not a shadow, Lord of rest and Lord of glory, every promise seen.
Alrighty, Well, the purpose of this teaching here is to analyze the distinctions between dogs, wolves, and swine in their role in spiritual corruption. The symbolism that's involved, teaching the ecclesia how to identify them. Um, Interestingly, here you see the dog has got the same look on its face that the wolf has, but it's a corgi. How dangerous is it? It's mostly all for show. If you stamp your foot at it or you reach for it, it's going to roll over and show you its belly. So I just wanted to bring that out real quick before I get too deep in. Dogs symbolize those who return to corruption and falsehood despite knowing the truth and seeking approval rather than righteousness. Wolves, on the other hand, they're predatory figures who infiltrate the community of believers to exploit and destroy for personal gain. Swine represent those who indulge in and promote spiritual filth. They're defiling both themselves and those who follow them. And by categorizing false teachers into these three distinct types, Scripture provides a framework for understanding the nature of apostasy in leadership and ministry. And this teaching here will explore the biblical passages and theological perspectives and historical context to demonstrate how these three categories of false teachers function within the body of believers. Recognizing these distinctions is crucial for discernment in spiritual leadership, ensuring that the flock remains protected from corruption. By examining these figures in light of the biblical teachings, we will gain a deeper understanding of the dangers posed by false teachers and the necessity of doctrinal purity. Before we get into the study, I want to go ahead and remind everyone it's just 3 months away for the Kingdom Restoration Conference. If you haven't registered, tomorrow after the Shabbat is over, go to kingdomrestorationconf.com and get signed up to go. This is going to be very vital for building Kol Israel to establish men as the leaders of their households, their flock that Yah intends them to be. I wanted to get that over with real quick. And I just skipped down too far in my notes. So we're going to stay here on this slide for just a minute longer. So I'm going to go ahead and define apostasy in the ministry. Apostasy, in its simplest definition, is a departure from the faith once delivered to the saints. That's Jude 1, 3, and 4. In the context of ministry, apostasy is particularly dangerous. It involves teachers, leaders, and prophets who mislead others away from the truth of Yah. It's not merely personal unbelief or moral failure, but it's an act of rejection or distortion of divine truth. Apostate leaders often they continue to function within religious structures that they have set up, while corrupting the doctrines that were given to us by our Messiah and his apostles. They're twisting Yah's commandments. They're leading others astray. And Scripture warns that in the last days, many will abandon the faith, giving heed to deceiving spirits, doctrines of demons, 1 Timothy 4:1. And apostasy in ministry is not always overt. In many cases, maybe even most cases, it manifests subtly through gradual erosion of the truth, the compromise of biblical standards, and the manipulation of grace to justify lawlessness. So the scriptural usage of animal imagery to depict false teachers and leaders is something that we see throughout Scripture. The Scripture frequently uses this imagery to describe individuals who engage in spiritual corruption, and particularly false teachers and leaders. This metaphorical language serves to illustrate in a practical way that is easy to understand their nature and their behavior, making it easier to recognize the influence within our communities. Three key animals repeatedly associated with false teachers are dogs, wolves, and swine. Each of them represent a specific type of apostate figure. Dogs are referenced in Proverbs 26:11 and 2 Peter 2:22, and it symbolizes those who will return to the former corruption after having known the truth. And their apostasy is marked by a cycle of relapse where they seek approval and validation rather than um, rather than uh, rather than true repentance. They are also linked to impurity, as seen in Deuteronomy 23:18, where the term dog is used in the context of those who engage in immoral and idolatrous practices. Wolves, as warned about by Yeshua in Matthew 7:15, are deceptive predators who disguise themselves as part of the flock but seek to devour the sheep. Paul echoes this warning in Acts 20, 29 and 30, stating that the savage wolves will come in amongst the believers and not sparing the flock. They're aggressive, they're strategic, they're manipulative. They have a rationale of tactics to achieve a goal that is self-serving. And Brother Caleb will understand this where he lives with the wolves, how they strategically will stalk a prey until they can manipulate it into movements that leaves it vulnerable. Those who have experience with wolves, um, they they often use charisma and false authority to gain influence as well. Swine are mentioned in Matthew 7:6, and again 2 Peter 2:22. It represents those who have no reverence for the sacred. They treat divine truth with contempt. Unlike dogs who seek human approval and wolves who exploit others, swine just simply revel in the filth and they drag others along with them. Um, Lost my place again. So they're associated with spiritual defilement, as seen in the dietary laws of Leviticus 11 and other places. And we know that they are unclean, and it's even unclean to even touch their carcass. So we can go on to the very first slide here. So let's go ahead and zoom in on each of these characters, so we can have a better understanding of how they operate and what to look out for. The dogs, they're false teachers. They return, as I said before, they return to the corruption for approval. The next slide here is the characteristics that we see of dogs. Matthew. Uh, da, 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 da. Oh, yes. Matthew 7:6 says, "Do not give what is holy to dogs." The portion about dogs in 2 Peter 2:22 is talking of the dogs returning to their vomit. Philippians 3:2 says, "Beware of the dogs, beware of evil workers, beware of the mutilation." There's another context of this mutilation. This had to do with circumcision, but not the circumcision that was done properly according to Torah, but the circumcision of the Pharisees, which left men mutilated. That's another subject we can cover at another time, but it's that same situation that's associated with the dogs. They lead to a mutilation through an appearance of keeping what is righteous. And then Revelation 22:15 talks about those who are outside. There's dogs and sorcerers and immoral persons. The next slide here talks about the dumbness and the laziness, or maybe the apathy of dogs. On this next slide. So, Brother Gregory.
Okay, is it the one where it talks about dogs' apathy? I think I've got that one up here.
Yes, sir. It's the next one. Apathy. Yes, sir. Isaiah 56:10-11. Um, his watchmen are blind. All of them know nothing. All of them are mute dogs, unable to bark. Dreamers lying down who love to slumber, and the dogs are greedy. They're not satisfied, and they are shepherds who have no understanding. They have all turned to their own way, each one to his unjust gain, to the last one. This is a failure of leadership in that we're confronting here, confronting the falsehood and maintaining doctrine of purity. We have to be aware of this failure. They appear to be a shepherd, but they're lazy. My dog, for example, he's a good watchdog here here at my house. He lets us know of things, but as soon as we're gone, he gets into mischief. He appears he appears to be doing his job when we're around in our presence, but as soon as the master has left the house, he does his own thing. And it's a common trait among dogs, and we see that in many of those who claim ministry as well. And this brings us to the next point. Next slide is the seeking of affirmation over truth. John 12:43 says, "For they love the praise of men more than they love the praise of Yah. They're approval hounds." The connection here, like with my dog, he does what he knows he's supposed to do because he knows he will get rewarded. He will get his food, he'll get a treat, he'll get pet, and he gets talked to sweetly when he does things he's supposed to do. And he craves that attention. But when that attention is removed from him, he just does whatever's in his nature. He'll make a mess. He will get into things he's not supposed to get into. He'll tear out the trash. He will, if you don't watch him closely, he'll run away and go play with the livestock down the road, which puts him in danger of getting shot around here. But they're only doing what's right for the appearance. The next one is the next slide here is how they return to corruption. And it's a cycle of rejecting truth, returning to false doctrine. The imagery of the vomit as it's rejected false it's the rejected false doctrine that they had put away at one time, and they returned to it. And it's the ability of such teachers to maintain steadfastness in their sound doctrine. They're tossed about by every wind of doctrine sometimes. They will shift positions, and they don't hold true to anything. It's all based upon their approval rating and how men view them and how they perceive that they are viewed. And the next characteristic of a dog is those who pervert the faith. Philippians 3:2 talks about Judaizers who are twisting the message of Yeshua. Now, we've all been called Judaizers, but that itself is a twisting. When you look at who the Judaizers actually were, they were the ones who were adding to and subtracting from the Torah. They were teachers who compromised truth for their status and their security. And most of Christianity today is the modern day version of what the Pharisees were in the first century. They have their own traditions, and they they teach that and twisting the message of Yeshua, twisting the Torah to their own benefit while appearing to be helpful and loving and kind. And that's one of the biggest trademarks I've noticed of ministers who are in this dog characteristics is everyone thinks they're a good man. Uh, my childhood pastor, I remember him fondly. He was a good man. He he was very kind and loving, and he taught this sermon when I was 7 or 8 years old, and I remembered it because it was called "Dog" or "Man's Best Friend," talking about dogs. And I re-listened to this about 10 years ago, and that's actually what inspired this study that turned into this lesson is this sermon of his, and he was comparing himself to a dog the whole sermon, and about the positive attributes of a dog. But while I heard this sermon as an adult, it triggered in me many of these thoughts, many of these passages that he was he was comparing himself to a negative, and then looking back on how he behaved, how he handled situations within his own family when corruption came up, that he was like this dog that returns to the vomit after knowing the truth. And yes, he seemed lovable and kind, and someone you wanted to know and to treat with respect. But just like a dog, it was a performance for the reward. And it was really sad. He had passed on, and so I started listening to some of his old sermons that were saved online, and it completely changed my whole perspective. And it was one of the things that helped to bring me out of churchianity. Um, the broader application here is of any teacher who compromises the truth of Scripture for their status, for their security, for their reward, for the tithes that they gather. Um, and it's all based upon that reward system of behaving properly, or behaving in a way that people are comfortable and are approving, but they sacrifice the truth, and they even turn away from the truth when the master isn't looking, or they suspect that the master isn't looking. So the next slide, the danger that they pose to the congregation. They are encouraging complacency and tolerance of false teachings. It's a weakening of the spiritual discernment of believers, and it promotes compromise. I know of a situation where the same pastor, his grandson had committed a sin, and it was a sin that I'm not going to get into the details, but it was a sin that other people, when they had committed the same sin, they were they were shunned, rejected, and called out as sinners, uh, all sorts of things. But when his grandson committed the same sin, he apologized and then was playing the drums in the church the very next service, and didn't have any of the repercussions of some of the other people who had done the same thing. Um, his his own son, um, the the uncle to this young man, uh, his own son became homosexual, and it was excused, and he was allowed to sing in church, even though it was a great sin. And it's eventually it caused higher up leadership in the organization to have him removed. And but it was allowed on the local level until someone in greater authority intervened. And it's that same thing, excusing their own behaviors while appearing to hold to righteousness. And it teaches a weakened form of grace and uh, repentance, because the standard is it's an unequal standard, it's an unequal weight, and it's that's a very dangerous thing for any congregation. So let's move on to wolves. The wolves are predatory Nicolaitans, and they're devouring the flock of Yah. Nicolaitans is, when you look at it properly, yes, it's named for Nicolatus, but his name meant destruction of the people, or to rule over, as in tyranny, over the laity, is the proper term. But it's of the destruction through tyranny of the people, and this is who the wolves are. They're warned of in Revelation, Revelation 2, 6, 15, and again the summation of this in verse 20, which we covered that in another lesson on the beheading. But they're all tied together. This next slide here is the beginning of the characteristics. Their wolves are false prophets in Scripture, as Matthew 7:15 says. Beware the false prophets. Inwardly, they are ravening wolves. Acts 20:29. After Paul said, after his departure, savage wolves will come in among you, not sparing the flock. Matthew 10:16 is talking about sheep among wolves being sent out into their midst. Yeshua is sending out the disciples into the midst of wolves, and so we're to be as shrewd as serpents and innocent as doves. We are to know who they are, to identify them, and we'll get in here at the end of how to handle them properly. So this next slide is the second characteristic. Is wolves are outwardly appearing righteous, but they're inwardly corrupt. The sheep's clothing is masking their predatory nature. Historical examples of this would be like I had a name in my mind just a second ago. It evaporated. But I'll go with a modern one now, and maybe I'll pick up with a historical one. But a modern example would be like Kenneth Copeland, someone like him. There's many preachers like that. They are predatory. They're seeking to devour. It's all about their personal gain. Yeah, he's very wild, very wild. I think he's demonic, to be honest. And as are the wolves. The wolves are the most dangerous of the three because of what they are doing. Another would be Osteen, Joel Osteen. Now his father was more of a dog. I knew him, I guess, by association. He was a former friend of one of my pastors when I was growing up. They had a falling out, but they had formerly been friends, so I knew of him that way. And he seemed to be more like a dog. His son is a wolf, completely and utterly a wolf. And it's all, he teaches a easy peasy empowerment message, all for the fleecing of the flock. Historically, you could probably use Balaam, which is also mentioned in Revelation with the Nicolaitans in chapter 2. Balaam appeared as a prophet, and he did have direct interaction with Yah, but he subverted the message. He did the right thing publicly, but he subverted the message in private to make pitfalls for the people. And that's our first main main message. Another one would be Simon Magnus. Uh, Even though he had a form of a conversion in the book of Acts, chapter 8, we see in it's there's even mention of him in some other extra canonical texts where he was the leader of basically a cult, and he was fleecing the flock. And we see that the his purpose was for making profit. Um, and yes, Balaam's sons were among the wizards in Pharaoh's court. So it's it's he was Balaam was a prophet, but he was for sale to the highest bidder for his own personal gain, is what it was all is what this is all about. So the appetite, this next slide, their appetite is for greed, power, status, wealth. 2 Peter 2:3 says, through covetousness they will exploit you. This is in working up towards the 2 Peter 2:22, where it talks of the dogs and the swine, and he's laying out the most dangerous portion is those who will try to exploit you. And it's financial and spiritual abuse in religious organizations. There's the organization that I came out of. There is a group, and they're not Torah observant. They're actually very bitter, but it's called spiritualabuse.org. And the whole purpose of this organization is to expose the wolf spirit within the organization I came from. And the unfortunate thing about this group is they did turn to bitterness, and they do not hold to the truth because they were wounded so deeply by this greed and power that is rampant throughout churchianity. So the financial and the spiritual abuse does way more harm than just about any other of their tactics. The next one is they're master manipulators. The next slide. And tactics are used to keep congregants loyal. They use fear and isolation and false authority. I already used the example of Balaam, but also Korah. Korah used fear and isolated some of the people away from Moses and Aaron, and he presented his false authority. He was a Levite, but he was not who Yah had given the authority to be the mediator in the priestly form. And he, for his own personal gain, sought to overthrow the priesthood, overthrow Aaron, and supplant Moses. And we see what happened. The earth opened up and swallowed him and his supporters. And what's interesting, though, is his sons did not share in his corruption, and they did not share in his penalty. And we see them serving in the temple in the Psalms. And David even wrote a psalm for them because of their faithfulness in keeping the doors of the temple, which is our tabernacle, which is a testament that even the offspring of the wolves can be saved. This next slide here is how they are used, and they are definitely, this is Satan. This is the Hasatan's agenda. They're instruments of that agenda. John 10:1 says that truly, truly, I say to you, he who does not enter by the door into the fold of the sheep, but climbs up some other way, he is a thief and a robber. It's a false authority. It's false prophets and corrupt leaders who refuse to come through Yeshua and instead establish their own authority through deception and coercion. John 10:10 says the thief comes only to steal, kill, and destroy. This has always traditionally been used to indicate Hasatan in Christianity circles. But the truth of it is, it's the preacher, it's the leader, the teacher who is using this false authority to steal the flock. And that's who the thief is it's the wolves who come in the back way. Um, the connection here to the Hasatan is it's the Asherah spirit. It's the ultimate deceiver working through false teachers. Now, this was not a point in my lesson until I taught this a couple of weeks ago at Yah's Misfits, and someone brought up the point that wolves are the only three in this category that of animals that are representing false authority. They're the only ones who are monogamous. And it's that Asherah spirit that we see that's connected in Revelation 2, 6 through 20. And it's the viciousness of their character. You see, everyone talks about the alpha wolf, the head male in charge. But if he comes into the den when the female does not want him in there, she's in there with her pups, she will rip him up one side and down the other, and he will run from her. It happens. Publicly, he may seem to be the one who's in charge, but when he goes into the den with his female, it's her that's really in charge. Exactly. Exactly. And it's the leaders who it can be either like the Nicolaitans in chapter 2 verses 6 and 15 of Revelation, who are the ones who submit to that authority, and then they're ruling over the rest of the flock in deception. But it's also the verse 20, the Jezebel woman that's ruling over him. And that is a major indicator of who the wolves are. This next one is we're leaving the characteristics and we're moving into the response, and it's the command to expose and to drive out the wolves. Matthew 7:16, Yeshua's warning is to discern their fruits. You will know them by their fruit. Paul exhorts to protect the flock, Titus 1, 9, and 11, holding fast to the faith, to the faithful word, which is in accordance with the teaching, so that he will be able to exhort in sound doctrine and refute those who contradict it. For there are many rebellious men, empty talkers, and deceivers, especially those of the circumcision. Now, the circumcision here is the party of the circumcision. It's the 7-step process of proselytization into Judaism, and it's not the circumcision of Genesis 17 or Exodus and Leviticus. It is a mutilation, and these are those who must be silenced. The only way to protect your flock from a wolf in the natural world is to kill it. You run it off, sure, it'll come back. You can put up a fence, you can do all sorts of things, but the wolves will keep coming back until they kill the sheep. The only way to protect your sheep is to kill the wolf. The same in the natural world, or in the spiritual world here, in the ecclesia setting. These wolves must be silenced, because as Paul says, they are upsetting whole families, teaching them things they should not teach for the sake of sordid gain. He is teaching Titus here how to identify these wolves. And that part there, that phrase, upsetting whole families, they are destroying households. And is that not a characteristic of that Asherah spirit, destroying households? All right, we can move on to swine now. And these are the easiest to identify. They're leaders they just revel in corruption and filth, and they drag others into it. They're the ones who call the commandments of Yah doctrines of demons or sin, or they even call keeping the commandments apostasy because they love their wicked ways. Uh, in this next slide here, the first characteristics of swine in Scripture is they reject holiness and truth. Yeshua said, "Do not cast your pearl before the swine, or they will trample them under their feet and turn and tear you to pieces." Peter 2:22, the part that's referencing the swine is, a sow having washed will return to her wallowing in the mire. They don't care. They love the filth. And that the next characteristics on this next slide is they reject truth. They reject the sacred wisdom of Scripture. The trampling of pearls, how this is how false leaders pervert sound doctrine. It's their inability to recognize the value of truth. They take the truth and they pervert it into lasciviousness. They take the grace of Yah and turn it into lasciviousness. It's they have no respect for the truth, and they hate the light because their deeds are wicked. And the connection here, this next slide, there's a deep connection to idolatry and abomination. Isaiah 65:4 is talking of those who are sitting among the graves and spend the night in secret places, who eat swine's flesh, and the broth of unclean meat is in their pots. Isaiah 66 talks of those who sanctify and purify themselves in the garden, following one in the center, who eat. That's also Asherah worship of every form. Who eat swine's flesh and detestable things and mice, and they will come to an end together. These apostate leaders are leading people into false worship. They revel in the wickedness because they love it. They love their traditions. They love the filth. They love the debauchery, the symbolisms. They love it all, and they reject the truth of Yah's word because their love for the filth. This next one, the characteristic here is another part of reveling in the filth. They delight in the corruption. The distinction from dogs is not merely returning to corruption, but taking pleasure in it. Jude 1:10 and 13 calls them brute beasts who corrupt themselves and others. And that's exactly what a pig does. We had a small little garden over here to my right a couple of years ago, and pigs got into it. It was fenced. Pigs got into it, and they tore up everything. They ate everything, and they left a huge pile of just mud and manure all in it. It made it useless to plant anything there for at least 2 years. And that's what they do. They just they devour everything and crap all over everything. That's just the way a pig does. And then they roll around in it and then spread it around. Carry that filth with them. You brush up against one, you're filthy. This is why you don't even touch the carcass of a pig. Around here, we are overrun with wild hogs in this part of East Texas. And the way I deal with them so I don't have to worry about touching them is I will shoot them to where they will run off and die somewhere else. And let the vultures, let the Department of Sanitation of Texas take care of them. It's the Texas vulture. So that's the only way to deal with them, and they're so overrun within the population, it's almost uncontrollable. It's one of the reasons why I bought that Beowulf that I referenced earlier in the chat. This next slide is the depths of their defilement. It's They're reveling in sin and calling it righteousness. 2 Peter 2:13 says they count it pleasure to revel in the daytime. It's the tolerance and promotion of sin under the guise of grace. It's that easy believism, that greasy grace that you can do. There's someone, I saw it on Facebook the other day, a popular teacher in the Christian world was saying you can sin every minute of every day and you're still saved because of the grace. And that's not only is it factually untrue, but it's just spreading the filth around, rubbing the crap all over everything. It's disgusting. This next slide here is how they drag others into the mire through their influence. So the role of apostate leaders in normalizing rebellion against Yah. The consequence, both they and their followers face destruction, as we see from Isaiah 66:17, and it will come. And the only way we can do this is when the sheep are following a swine. We have to pull them out of the mire, clean them up, and show them they show them what the swine is doing. And ancient shepherds had a technique when a lamb was always wandering. They would take their club and they'd break its leg. And then they would mend it, and they would carry that lamb in their bosom, strapped to their chest, so it could feel the heartbeat of the shepherd, hear its voice as it calls to the sheep, until it was healed up enough to walk. And after that, it would always follow the shepherd. So sometimes the only way to save someone, this is pulling them out of the fire with fear. Sometimes the only way to save someone is to show them, tell them the truth that hurts them. Now, I'm not advocating physical harm. I'm talking of exposing their preconceptions into where it wounds them in their mind, where they think they're saved, but they're not. And showing them that, and then teaching them to know the voice of their shepherd. That's the only way to save a sheep that is following a pig. So, in conclusion, I've got, I think, 3 conclusion slides. So the summary of the distinctions, dogs, again, are false teachers who compromise the truth for affirmation, and they return to falsehood for the appeasement of men. They love the approval more than they love the truth. Wolves are false prophets who actively deceive and exploit the flock, and these are the most dangerous, the most vicious, the most ruthless, the smartest. They do this for their own personal gain. Matter of fact, the word church comes etymologically from the Greek goddess Circe, and it's the same etymological root for the word coven, like a coven of witches. Same root. Circe was the goddess of witchcraft and deception. She had a circular house. It's also the etymological root of the word circle. She would enchant men, bring them into her house, make them as dumb beasts, and feed on them as they lived. This is what the wolves do. It's that Asherah spirit. They feed on them. They fleece the flock. And then we have the swine, the apostate leaders who just revel in corruption, sling mud all over everything, lead others into abominations with that greasy grace. And so the need for spiritual vigilance in recognizing and resisting these dangers is vital. We can go to the next slide here. James 4:1-3 says, "Beloved, do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits to see whether they be of Yah, because many false teachers have gone out into the world, and by this you know the Spirit of Yah. Every spirit that confesses that Yeshua HaMashiach has come in the flesh is from Yah, and every spirit that does not confess Yeshua is not from Yah. This is the spirit of Antichrist, which you have heard that is coming and is now already in the world. Let's go on to the next slide real quick. Deuteronomy 13, 1 through 3. If a prophet or a dreamer of dreams arises among you, and this is how to test the spirits, and gives you a sign or a wonder, and the sign or wonder comes true concerning which he spake to you, even if that sign or wonder comes true. But he says to you, saying, let us go after other Elohim, who you have not known, and let us serve them. You shall not listen to the words of that prophet or that dreamer of dreams, for Yahweh, your Elohim, is testing you to find out if you love Yahweh, your Elohim, with all of your heart and with all of your soul, your heart and your mind. So it's a test. These dogs and wolves and swine are a test of the flock to see if they know their master's voice, to see if they will be led astray. And the call to action here, there may be one more slide, I'm not sure. Yeah, that's good right there. The call to action here is holding fast to the truth, guarding the flock, and remaining steadfast in Yah's word. So, dogs can be trained, but we have to know who they are. We have to know that dogs can be useful to the master shepherd, but they require strict supervision. Swine, they can't be trained. They're going to do what swine do. They're going to get filth all over everything, lead the flock into the filth. But wolves have to be killed. False teachers with that wolf spirit have to be identified, ostracized, and silenced. They have to be spoken out against. This is one of the reasons why some of the people in the Assembly of the Righteous have response videos. They are addressing these wolves and showing the doctrines that they're teaching for the influence, the power, and the profit that they are coming after. I know Brother Pete just made another response video to a supposed Torah teacher on this very issue, where he's teaching a false doctrine for his own personal gain. And it's not necessarily a financial gain, but it's a influence gain. We know several people in our community who do these response videos quite often, and this is one of the methods of exposing these wolves and silencing them to shoot the wolf that's coming after your sheep. And that is the proper response. You can train a dog, but you can't let him be autonomous. You have to keep them under wraps. You can run the swine off. You can keep the sheep separated from them, but you have to silence the wolves. And that's the command that we were given by the apostle to Titus, to silence them. And that's all I have for today, Brother Gregory.
Okay. Very good classification of the three categories that we as men, not only of our family, but the group of men who make up the assembly, have to look out for. Notice Brother Jared presented, out of the three, something at least can be done about one of them, that being the dog. But the other two, you have to remove. And so, very good point with regard to some of the response videos. I didn't even think of it like that, but you're absolutely right. These teachers and you look at the numbers of people they have beguiled, basically to teach what is I call it feminism light. And so here is a serious matter to consider. Okay, so we're going to finish up with the benediction, and we're going to sing the song of peace. You guys should know this by now. And on your end, you can sing it along with me. And the song goes like this. Shalom to you now, shalom, my friends. May Yahweh's mercies bless you well, my friends, in all your living and through your loving. Yahweh be your shalom, shalom, shalom. Yahweh be your shalom. And now, as we recite the blessing, it is adapted from Psalms 20. And if you agree with these, then on your end, you see it in the yellow here, say, so be it. And so we do the blessing. May Yahweh answer you in the day of trouble. May the name of the Elohim of Jacob protect you. May he send you help from the sanctuary and sustain you from Zion. May he remember all your gifts and look favorably on your many prayer offerings. And we say together, so be it. May he give you the desires of your heart and make all your plans succeed. May we shout for joy at your victory and raise a banner in the name of our Elohim. May Yahweh grant all your petitions. And we say together, so be it. And as we go throughout this week, remember that even though we have many trials and tribulations in this life, the words of Moses given to Joshua, be strong, have courage. And this is the attitude we, especially as men and the head of our homes, should resonate. And that is summed up with this. Hazak, hazak, the neat hazak, be strong, and may we be strengthened in Messiah Yeshua. And I thank you all for joining. And for those of you out there in cyberspace, reach out to us if you would like to hear more about the Torah.